Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dairy Hollow Chinwag, brought to you by the Writers Colony at Dairy Hollow. We are a nonprofit residency program for writers of all backgrounds, genres, and levels of experience. We have 8 private writing suites that are housed in 2 adjacent buildings in a wooded setting within walking distance to the quaint arts village of Eureka Springs in the Arkansas Ozarks. We provide uninterrupted writing time, a European-style dinner served 5 nights a week in our community dining room, and the company of other professional writers when you want it. We also have a community kitchen stocked with the basics for other meals. You can learn more at writerscolony.org. So today it is my great pleasure to introduce Brody, Parrish, Craig. They are the author of Boyish, a poetry chapbook published last year, and The Patient is an Unreliable Historian, which is forthcoming from Omnidon in 2024. They are also the editor of Twang, a regional anthology of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming creators. So thank you so much for joining me today, Brody. I would like to just start by asking you to tell us all a little bit more about yourself.
Definitely. Hi. It's really great to be here. I had a wonderful time at the Writers Colony. And so I'm just excited to talk a little more about what that experience was like for me. I am a writer, artist, and educator based in the Arkansas area. I earned my MFA at the University of Arkansas and graduated in 2017. And I currently teach at a community college locally. I'm also originally from Louisiana. And a lot of my poetry and writing deals with themes of Southern upbringing and really reconciling, especially in Boyish, like reconciling spirituality and Southern upbringing, and also being a trans and gender nonconforming person from the South. And then this new collection that I'm working on, The Patient is an Unreliable Historian, is a lot of themes related to madness, criminality, abolition, and what it means to be a disabled person today in our world. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's really nice to hear your background and how that's influenced everything that you're working on. So could you tell us a little more about, you've mentioned what you write, but what inspires you to work in these themes?
So for me, I think that poetry and writing can't really be separated from lived experience in the world that we live in. So personally, my commitment, and I think a lot about this, but I think about poetry and writing as a lens to interrogate systems of oppression. So when we think about language as a whole, language holds so much of our history and so much of the world and the systems that we are surrounded by. So like a really small example would be the phrase stir crazy, right? So one of the things that I found through research and just thinking about language is we use this phrase stir crazy all the time, which I think can be in one sense harmful from an ableist point of view whenever we're using it out of context. But also it originates from a term that was used initially when folks were in solitary confinement, and that idea of being in a stir and going crazy in solitary confinement, which we don't think about this when we hear these words just in everyday conversation. But I use this as an example for what I try to do in my poetics and in my writing, is take language that holds all of these histories, good, bad, and different, and use it as a way to interrogate the broader systems within our world. And so that's what really inspires me, is seeing language as a tool that holds these histories and how can we use it to interrogate these broader systems. I'm also really inspired by music. Music comes into my poetry a lot. Recently, I was working on a piece that was kind of like a cinto, but I took a lot of song lyrics and cut them up and rearranged them into a poem about mental health and side effects of medication. So there was like stuff in there from Nicki Minaj to placebo that ended up in this poem. And so I'm also inspired by music, but also just by contemporary writers and artists today, as well as my students and what they bring to the classroom when they're talking about writing or the humanities.
Absolutely, that all makes sense. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience at Dairy Hollow, what your stay was like, and how did it affect your writing?
Yeah, so I think one of my favorite takeaways from my experience at Dairy Hollow, outside of the time I had set aside to write and research and kickstart projects, was at those dinner conversations. So right now, I spent most of my time working on revisions of my poetry collection, The Patient is an Unreliable Historian, but I also spent a large chunk of my time working on research and kickstarting a creative nonfiction project that I'm starting. And I got like amazing recommendations just through dinners and talking with other writers that were there for various books that like weren't on my radar yet, but now that I'm determined to read in these next few years as I work on this new book. So just that community space of being around other writers that were interested in what I was doing and giving me suggestions was great. Another writer that was there at the time is someone that I knew from when I was in undergraduate school and had literally not seen since like 2012. So that was like a weird turn of events. And we were able to, trade notes on like what we've been up to, but also she gave me some great advice on different literary journals that I might consider that I hadn't heard of before. So that community was great. And then just having the time to really focus on writing and research, I was able to finish up reading a couple different books that, I've been reading in my downtime, but just having that set aside time to concentrate, I found it very productive. And I even like randomly wrote like a flash fiction piece, which is not something I typically do. So that was an interesting surprise. Outside of, the things that I came there to do, I had a lot of surprises along the way just from having that space and time to write.
That's really good to hear. And I completely agree. There is something magical about that community dining room and the conversations that are had around it. Well, I thank you so much for telling us a little bit about what you've been working on and what you have been writing. So now can you tell us what you'll be reading for us today?
Definitely. So I am going to start off by reading an excerpt from an essay called Mad Queer Magic. This essay was just published at Just Femme and Dandy magazine in volume 2. So if you're interested, you can read the rest of it there. And then I'm going to read a couple poems from my poetry chapbook Boyish that came out with Omnidon this past year as well.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear it. We'll go ahead and turn it over to you now.
All right. So I'm just going to read the first maybe page or so of this essay. It's called Mad Queer Magic. At my friend's 5th birthday, they gather the girls to give them makeovers in full-blown ball gowns, lipsticks, and the works. As we walk the runway, I carry the train of an oversized skirt as parents gaze in awe. I'm expected to be happy, to feel beautiful, to walk with pride. And instead, I find myself fighting tears, telling myself to keep walking, then hiding in the bathroom. There's a photograph, a woman with curly brown hair pulled half back in a gray vest and business trousers, her hand outstretched with lipstick to apply red to my baby lips. She is smiling, yet focused. I am told to hold still, moments before the frame. As a child, I was placed in some kind of behavioral care that I rarely remember. Around this time, I spent my summers learning how to properly hold a pencil, how to walk appropriately, how to talk without a stutter or a lisp, how to become someone my parents believed in. When I asked my mother about it recently, she casually explains that the clinic was for children with sensory processing disorder. You were always different. Your teachers had trouble with you too. I could never sit still. I'd tear up paper at my seat, and despite hiding the fidgeting in my desk, since Miss Harrison called it a distraction, I still was berated by her time and time again. Once hiccuping in class without control, she claimed I was doing it for attention. She chastised me angrily in front of my classmates before sending me to complete my test in a separate empty room. Looking back, I'm not sure if I hated the dress because of my hatred for being watched by strangers, my budding understanding of girl code rooted in misogyny, or because the sleeves itched. I don't know. Either way, I think back on this moment often when reflecting on my transition. The first moment in which gender norms were imposed on me so explicitly, and my body became spectacleized as the ideal woman. The first time that my social world betrayed me and I had no option to talk back. I feel for the girl in the dress. I feel for the boy in the photo. I feel for the child who couldn't have beauty, who thought this was what it meant to be beautiful. If beauty was meant for this moment, who was I to cry in discomfort at being made so beautiful? Over the years, my choice in clothes oscillated. One year I was band tees over button downs and men's jeans. The next, leggings and short denim skirts. One year I was leg hair and tie-dye t-shirts. Another I was full-blown goth. I'll never forget the moment in high school where an older man commented on my legs for their shape. How they're wide, like men's legs, like boys' legs, like nothing that should be in dresses. I was sitting in a cafe stoned. I could have killed him then and there. Those were the days of close shaves before I found the revelry of my own smirk at the stubble, the beauty in the moment that a stranger gawked at my leg hair and walked away. My appearance was like a social experiment. I had just begun a deep journey into feminism and rejection of social norms. Much like the moment years later when I shaved my head after reading Beauvoir, it was for science, it was for God, it was for glory, it was for me. So the rest of this essay goes on to talk about different encounters that I had in a psychiatric facility, the intersections of madness and disability with queer experiences and trans experiences, and the broader theme of rebirth through fashion. So I'm going to leave it there, but if you're interested, you can read the rest. And then I'm going to pull out a couple poems from Boyish, and this is from Amidon Publishing. Let's see. I think I'm just going to read the first poem and then the last poem. This first poem is called House of Rising Suns. Younger when I met you, dreamt you, fed me queen bees on the balcony. Cotillion came that morning and my mouth stung sweet, pretending I was a girl grown straight into Southern corsage. You knew I was their firstborn son that wasn't ready to come each Sunday. We watched the Weather Channel and your twin-sized as the hurricanes rose with names of kids we knew, conjuring danger, an angry fist the shape I couldn't part with or without naming the rise in me. And no, I never sucked the honey off, but made a gilded mirror from your portrait, drawing in my throat unsung eye of hurricane, that sunshine cracked open and cut, taffeta streak over the Gulf Ridge blue. Down south, we call our fathers, yes, sir. Mother, for your father's sake, just do this once. I never knew that blue, irreverent, black-eyed Ho Susanna kind of wild until the day I watered at your mouth. And the last poem I'll read is called Full. There are hives of honey, hives of stress, red crop circles, memories sting, no beekeeper for those warm summer mornings after bodies spilled their blanks into mine. And the moon, that cheap machine of light I'd saved for a dark day, masked itself and slipped behind the comb of sunrise. My grandfather was a beekeeper. He wore thick gloves and masked his hands. He looked like a boxer in the early morning dark. In the hospital, my grandfather eats cheese crackers, and his orange crumb-covered mouth is a baby's again. My mother combs hair lightly with her fingers. In the psych hospital, they fed us bologna sandwiches on stale bread. We stuffed our mouths with leftover reasons to be alive. Parents, grandparents, our siblings, local honey in our kettled tea. Someday I will wipe my father's chin or ask if table manners matter to the dead. If heaven is the correct placement of a fork on a table or a road. This day, another graveled crook, leaving my body at the intersection, like when the apple tree was split down the middle by some lightning, and my sister cried until we broke the homemade pie open like a prayer. If I squint to know the moon is full, maybe I'll remember why I came here. I came here to get fed and cut the bullshit. I came here to cut the sugar on my baby teeth. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing that incredible work. I know this is going to stay with me for a while, and I'm sure for other listeners as well on our YouTube channel. This is a huge blessing to receive today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, well, thank you for making time. And thank you to everyone who is watching the YouTube video. So Brody Parrish Craig is a recipient of the Writer Colony at Dairy Hollow Scholarship Fund, which was developed in December 2019 to assist emerging writers and those from marginalized communities with financial aid so that they can have uninterrupted writing time at a Dairy Hollow residency. Over $17,000 in support has been provided so far to 40 writers for more than 300 residency nights. Scholarships are awarded on an as-needed basis depending on availability. If you would like to support our scholarship fund, please visit writerscolony.org and select the donate button in the upper right-hand corner where you'll see the scholarship fund in a drop-down. And thank you so much.
Thank you.